Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Suds, Snacks, and Socialism Virtual Forum. Today's topic is the California Propositions Demystified. Our speakers today are all members of the Peace and Freedom Party who have scrutinized and written about the statewide propositions on the November 8th California ballot. We have other co-sponsors of this forum, and we pretty much agree on these. In any case where other parties disagree, I'm sure that they will speak up in the open session. So the speakers today are myself, Marsha Feinland, David Landry, and Dave Campbell. This forum series is a cooperative effort of the Alameda County Peace and Freedom Party, Bay Area System Change, Not Climate Change, and the Oakland Greens. As I said, I'm Marsha Feinland, and I'm co-moderating today with Stan Woods. We'll be starting with an initial presentation by the speakers. Following that will be your turn to ask questions and make statements. Please find the chat and participant icons at the bottom of your screen. And also, that's old information, it's the reactions icon. You can signify that you want to be on the stack by using the hand-raising feature under reactions. We welcome your various political opinions. We do not allow personal attacks on individuals. Now I'll turn it over to Stan, who will introduce the speakers and moderate the discussion.
Okay, hi. As Marsha said, there's three speakers today. Marsha Feinland from Berkeley, California, Alameda County. David Landry from Cypress, Orange County, and David Campbell from San Francisco. We're going to start out with Marsha Feinland. For those that don't know, not only is she one of the leading members of the Peace and Freedom Party, she's a former elected official of the Berkeley Rent Board, and she's a former retired public school teacher. And she was while a teacher, she was an active member of the Alameda Education Association. And she'll present an overview of the state propositions that'll be put up to the voters on November the 8th. Marsha?
Thank you, Stan. So as Stan mentioned, there are 7 propositions. They're numbered 1, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. I'll be mostly speaking about, well, I'm going to mention all of them, but David Landry will be speaking more about Proposition 26 and 27. And Dave Campbell will be talking mostly about Prop 30, so I'm going to be very brief about those two. Proposition 1 is the one that guarantees the right to reproductive freedom in the California State Constitution, and it was placed on the ballot by the legislature. It makes explicit the right to abortion and contraceptions in the California Constitution. Previously, the right was assumed under the right to privacy, but it seems like we can't assume anything anymore. And the legislature found it, I'd say, opportune as well as important to introduce it at this time. So I think that the Democrats in the legislature had their own reasons for doing this at this time. But as a women's rights activist, I think it's a really important step and one that's long overdue. What's interesting I'm not going to talk too much about it or try to convince you, because I think all of us here want to guarantee the rights to abortion and contraception to all Californians. But I think what's interesting, I went over to Cal one day, Cal Berkeley campus, and there was a big rally and counter rally. The rally was started by the opponents of Prop 1. And in California, they're not really, they're almost pretending that they think it's okay to have the right to abortion, but they're focusing on the fact that it doesn't explicitly deny late-term abortions, because under present law in California, the late-term abortions have to be for the protection of the health and the life of the mother. All other abortions are kind of unconditionally guaranteed. This is a red herring. It's not explicit either way in the new law. But that is not what matters. What matters is what is behind the campaign against abortions in this country. The Herschel Walker case really shows us what it's really about. It's not about abortion, it's about power, and it's about power over women and gender nonconforming people. And I always liked the slogan when we had the abortion rights movement was very active, which it's coming up again. But I just remember in the 90s when we said, not the church, not the state, women will decide our fate. And this is true today as much as it ever was. So we're urging, as many people in California are, yes on Prop 1. And what's interesting about Prop 1 is that it's also making more people interested in voting. So that's kind of an important thing, I think. Okay, so I'm going to skip over Propositions 26 and 27 because those are going to be covered by David Landry. But I will say that the Peace and Freedom Party is for yes on 26 to uphold tribal sovereignty, and no on 27 because the outside betting companies are trying to pretty much impose their control over gambling in California and their profits from it. I'm going to go on to Proposition 28. What's interesting about Proposition 28 is that there's no opposition to it. It is for funding art and music in the schools, and it's not just art, traditional art and music programs. It includes all aspects of art, music, dance, theater, computer graphics, and video. And what it does is it provides additional funding that is equal to 1% of the present guaranteed funding for education. So basically it's another basically a 0.5% of the state budget. It doesn't impose any new taxes. It requires 80% of the money go to actual teachers who are qualified to teach in the arts. And it provides 70% of the funding goes on a per pupil basis to all public schools, including charter schools, which is an unfortunate aspect that we pretty much have to deal with till we get rid of charter schools. And the other 30% is earmarked to schools based on their percentage of low income students. So that students who don't have as much opportunity to get arts and music from other sources get more funding for that in schools. And this is, to me, it's really important because I have always taught in low income schools. In the high income schools, the parents are able to contribute more money to the school for arts programs. That doesn't happen in the low income schools. So it's good that there's an extra amount of money going to the low income schools for the arts and music programs. I'm going to move on to Prop 29. Prop 29.
We're being urged, put onto
I'm
Facebook,
sorry.
and we cannot
Yep.
get the chat.
Listen to the speaker, do not talk.
What Norma's saying is the chat is not working. Can we just worry about that later and let us go through our presentations and then we can worry about the chat. Thank you. I see some people chatting, so it's popping up on my screen and it's kind of a little bit distracting. I'll try to ignore it. I'm going to move on to Proposition 29. This is about dialysis clinics. And what we say about it is let's make health care safer. Because what Proposition 29 is sponsored by basically the healthcare union, SEIU, United Healthcare West. And what they are saying is that at least one doctor or nurse practitioner or physician's assistant be present when dialysis is taking place, and that these whichever medical professional is there has to have at least 6 months experience in end-stage renal disease care. You have to understand that people who go to dialysis clinics are in end-stage renal disease. It's not it's serious, and there ought to be a medical staff person there. That the second part is that dialysis-related infections need to be reported to the California Department of Public Health. The clinics must also provide the California Department of Public Health with a list of doctors with at least 5% ownership interest in the clinic, and they also need to report all people with 5%, at least 5% ownership interest in the clinic. They have to get the California Department of Public Health written consent before closing or substantially reducing the services at the dialysis clinics. And really important, they cannot refuse care based on the payment method. So they can't refuse Medi-Cal, Medicare recipients from care at the dialysis clinics. People say this is special interest. It's a healthcare measure, and we support it. So let's take a look at the money. I forgot to say that I think for all of the propositions, it's important to look at the money. And if you have any questions, I've kind of jotted down where all the money comes from on all the propositions. I can answer those later. But on this one, the SEIU United Healthcare West is spending less than $8 million. That's how much they've raised to fight this proposition, plus about 17,000 in-kind donations. The anti on this are the big dialysis clinics. There are 2 big ones in California, plus 3 or 4 other smaller ones. They're spending more than $86 million to defeat this proposition. So all of the ads you see about this, you know who's paying for them. And that's a shame, because I think that the unions have a beef. This has really arisen from a problem that the unions have with the healthcare care, with the dialysis clinics, but it's an important one. They want better healthcare for the public. Okay, so I'm going to skip over Proposition 30. Dave Campbell's going to talk about that one, and I'm going to move on to Proposition 31. Proposition 31 is a referendum. That means that it's that means that it's a revote on a law that was already passed. I mean, it's turned over to the public to vote on a law that was already passed by the legislature. This is Senate Bill 793, which was passed by the California legislature in 2020, and it bans most flavored tobacco products, just outright bans them. There's an exception for fancy cigars and for basically hookah product. There's a certain kind of tobacco that is used in water pipes. Because basically this law is targeted to prevent nicotine addiction in children. We think it's a good law and that it should be upheld. The main reason people put these referendums on the ballot, besides trying to overturn them for their own profit, and that's basically the tobacco companies, is because it delays the implementation of the law for 2 years. So since 2020, since that law was passed, it hasn't been able to be implemented because of the referendum. The pro forces, which include Michael Bloomberg, which is interesting, who's spent around $4 million on this. Around $6 million has been spent to affirm and uphold SB 793, which would be yes on Proposition 31. There are healthcare groups. Kaiser Foundation has spent over $1 million, and then the American Cancer Society the American Heart Association and the American Lung Association have all put in considerably less money because they don't have a whole lot of money. The no forces, over almost $21 million has been spent to defeat this. And that's, and also over $2 million in-kind contributions. And it's all from tobacco companies. So it's pretty clear who's interested in passing Prop 31 and who put the referendum on the ballot because they want to have more customers for tobacco products and addict our children. So that's the overview. And now I'm going to turn it back to Stan, who will introduce the next speaker.
Thanks, Marsha Feinland. Next, we have David Landry. Dave is a Peace and Freedom Party webmaster for the State Peace and Freedom Party. He's also a resident of Cypress, Orange County, which he informed me is within eyesight of Disneyland. And he's the Orange County Peace and Freedom Party chair. And he'll be talking about Propositions 26 and 27. You're on, David.
Right. So I put this slide first because I like the green of it. We're going to talk about Propositions 26 and 27, both of which have to do with sports betting and the legalization of it in California. We'll just start right at the very beginning. Here we go. Here's the text for Proposition 26. More or less, Proposition 26 would allow sports betting in the state of California, but only in locations currently providing casino games. Okay, i.e. the casinos that are run mostly by Native Americans. However, there are also 2 horse tracks who, in the very common pattern around the US, have become racinos, which means that there's lots of slot machines and table games there, and you can also bet simulcast races of other horse races around the world, really, whenever it's open. This allows the horse tracks to stay open all year, and it allows the horse tracks to stay open because guess what? Horse breeding and horse racing is a loss in every state in this country that it is in. So these racinos have been adapted to them to help support the horse breeding and horse racing industry. Proposition 27 would legalize online sports betting for persons 21 years of age or older, quote unquote. And part of this would be to impose approximately, by the letter of the law, 10% tax on the associated revenue generated from the casino. Really what we mean is profit. Okay, now before we go any further, I just wanted to say straight up, just want to give the full disclosure. I do love sports. I love sports history more than I love actual sports. I do love sports. I do like sports betting very much. I don't have a problem betting. I am too cheap to have a problem with gambling. I bet way too little, but I do love to do it very often. I would also like to say that even though I do love professional sports, I do not purchase any product related with the league or its advertisers. Now, none of this is to apologize to my comrades. And none of this obviously is to endear myself to the folks that I'm talking to here today. But I just want to say, I like sports betting. And I'm about to take the stands I'm about to take on these positions as we discuss them. Okay, now we're gonna have to do a little bit of history in order to put things into context and why these propositions are so important to California and really to the whole country right now. Okay, the modern history of, let's say, casino gaming in this country goes back to about 1988, where one of the all-time favorite presidents of the Peace and Freedom Party, Ronald Reagan, signed the Internet Gaming Regulatory Act. This, of course, was based on Senate Bill 555 by Senator Inouye of Hawaii. And basically, I mean, in my view, speaks to. Really, I think if you look at it objectively, this could very well be the single best agreement that the Native American folks ever signed with the US federal government. It's certainly the only one that has really stuck beyond about 12 months, I think it is, as compared to any other treaty this country has made with them. This allowed for the federal establishment of gaming standards, which I'll talk about in just a moment, the establishment of the National Indian Gaming Commission, of course, and it allowed for tribal regulation of Class II gaming activities not owned by Indians, providing tribal requirements are at least as restrictive as state laws governing similar gaming. Okay, this is the key to the whole issue of any political discussion regarding reservation casinos. Okay, casinos on reservation. What this says is that if state law in a given state provides for, let's say they say bingo is legal in this state. That means that Native Americans can open up bingo halls without question, provided they follow the dictates of that law, right? So, and okay, we'll get on to that in a minute. The three types of gambling we should also know about. Type 1 gambling, not so important. This is so-called traditional Indian gambling. This was how it was worded at the time. I really actually don't exactly know what they mean, but it also allows for, contests with small prizes. You're talking about raffles, stuff that, where you go to a town meeting and there's a door prize or something like that. Okay, this just makes that legal anywhere in the United States, if you want to write it into your state constitution or whatnot. Class 2 gaming, this is mostly about bingo, okay? But note that it is also about, quote, games played exclusively against another player rather than against the house. Of course, we're talking about poker, right? And you may remember in California during the Schwarzenegger administration, how all these poker rooms blossomed across the state of California. And that was due to this. That was due to this. We finally allowed it in this state, allowed poker games in this state, and so they were allowed to be open. And finally, Class 3 gaming are most of the games we associate with the casino. Now, this last one, okay, of course, we have the list here: slots, blackjack, craps, roulette, all the typical stuff you'd see, and wagering games. Now, when you start talking about sports betting, you can already see that there's problems arising here. In sports betting, you're not really betting against the house, but you're not really betting against anybody else. Is it a wagering game? Well, yes. The Poker Players Alliance, this is a big lobby group, they'll argue that sports betting is a game of skill, so maybe it shouldn't be in any of these categories at all, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, the point is that rules like this set by IGRA have been followed by Native American tribes since they were incepted. And the companies behind, especially Prop 27, are all about skirting these laws that have been followed for 35 years. So this is what happened after IGRA. All of a sudden, all of these states, at least technically, Native Americans could open a casino. I believe that there's still, I believe there are still no Native American casinos in Alaska, but there could be. And I also believe that since this time, this is from 2008, since this time, Missouri and Arkansas have also opened up casinos as well. So just to give you some idea, this is what it looks like. Now, okay, the next big step in gambling involves George W. Bush, who snuck in this very interesting little piece of legislation. It's kind of an 11th hour thing, tacked it onto this act or this bill then called the Security and Accountability for Every Port Act, or the Safe Port Act of 2006. Now, this was one of the many, many things designed to quote unquote clamp down on terrorism. And a lot of it was about, this NSA stuff, about surveillance of American citizens, typical kind of post 9/11 stuff. However, this one clause called the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, which was the last part of this bill to be repealed, ultimately, by the way, was about gambling. And what this was is it put a prohibition on acceptance of any payment instrument for unlawful internet gambling. Now, understand what that means. What that means is that, hey, you're perfectly fine if you want to try and play at an online gambling site, no problem. However, the banks are charged with basically filing a criminal complaint if you try to do so. Okay, the banks were in charge of preventing transactions to a website or websites that the government was like perfectly fine with staying open, right? So very strange law here going on, but it was rather effective at keeping the bettors out of most gambling and sports betting websites. Also in the UGA was this sneaky little carve out for horse racing. Okay, pretty predictable. Horse racing's been, had an exception in betting by phone, betting cross state in this country forever. So not surprising there, but also fantasy sports. There's this carve out for fantasy sports. Now, I don't want to bore too many people about fantasy sports. Basically, what fantasy sports is, you're usually in a league with a bunch of friends of yours, and at the beginning of the season, y'all pick a bunch of players, and then whichever of your players does the best over the course of the season, you win. And then typically the way that these things would go in the 2000s, in the early 2000s is, y'all throw in like $100 in the pot or something like this, and whoever wins the Super Bowl of your league or whatever gets the pot. Okay, simple enough. So they made this weird little carve out in the UGA. So just in case you wanted to play for money online in this realm, you could. Okay, this will come back in just a minute here. Okay, here we go. Here's a couple of names you might be familiar with, if you might get familiar with if you're not already. In 2014, there was this very bizarre breakout somewhere in the early 2010s. Somebody created this new game called Daily Fantasy Sports, Daily Fantasy Football. And what this was, rather than getting together with a bunch of guys and picking your team at the beginning of the year and sticking with them, you got to pick all your players at the beginning of every week and compete with hundreds of thousands of, most of which were just playing the algorithm. Okay. It essentially turned out, the New York Times did a story about this a few years later, and this big scandal came out where it was revealed that 5% of the players were making 95% of the money. Essentially, what they were doing is they were just filling out 10,000 ballots at a time with different combinations, and then just winning enough of the top spots to make a profit. Okay, so basically, the big fish were winning. It was a total scam. And that year, in every football game, every commercial break was an advertisement for FanDuel or DraftKings. Why? Because of this sneaky little thing that George Bush had snuck into the UGA that I don't know if anybody saw this coming. But all of a sudden, you had this thing that you could bet on every week and lose money. And it was, since it was not explicitly made illegal in any state constitution, or at least in most state constitutions, people were doing it. These guys were making money hand over fist. It was basically acknowledged as a gray market. And guess what? We're paying no taxes. Of course not. Finally, in 2015, the New York State Attorney General said, okay, let's hold on a second. You're making hundreds of millions here and not giving us any. So let's take a look at this. They brought a lawsuit against DraftKings specifically, and then the other fans. They brought a case against them as well. saying stuff like in the brief that he filed, DraftKings only offers a way to bet on existing sporting events, nothing more. It's just betting. Quote, its approach is not new. Bookmaking operations in jurisdictions with legal gambling, such as Nevada, have long accepted sports proposition or prop bets. Quote, DraftKings continues to accept wagers from a gambling business in flagrant disregard of New York state constitution, penal laws, and other statutes. As soon as this motion was filed, and this was in November 2016, immediately every other state said, nope, we're not letting this happen anymore. You can't gamble here. Any money you had in there, you lose. Players, sorry, done. Commercials, gone, like instantly. Why? Because everybody was waiting on New York to make the decision on this case. Okay, well, by 2016, New York sells out, right? There's another classic national level politician, Governor Andrew Cuomo. In October 2016, just in time for the Series, one might note, big gambling holiday, that is, New York reached a settlement with DraftKings in which DraftKings had to pay $12 million in fine. And Governor Cuomo, by the time that this settlement was reached, had signed a bill making daily fantasy sports legal in New York. Okay. And the dominoes fell throughout the rest of the country as they had before. However, it brought up a lot of these questions about, well, should we just make sports betting legal? It makes so much money. Marijuana kind of worked out well. Let's think about this. Okay. So the big deal was in May 2018 when the Supreme Court heard a case called Murphy versus NCAA. Now, this overturned a 1992 act called the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, PASPA. PASPA, interestingly enough, and I know that there's probably not too many sports fans here, but you may remember this. PASPA was written into law only because of the revelations that Pete Rose, the famous baseball player, had been betting on ball games. This law was made because there was evidence that professional baseball players were betting on baseball. Now, you may recall, this is what changed sports forever in 1919 when the Chicago White Sox threw the World Series. Baseball has always been about not gambling. And so they had George Bush Sr. get this act passed into law to protect sports from gambling. Gambling effectively outside of Nevada, betting on sports outside of Nevada, was basically made illegal on the federal level due to this law. Possible. Okay. So in about 2011, the Big Four organized sports leagues, combined with the NCAA sports, college sports, started hammering away at PASPA in New Jersey. Okay, Doug Christie's hosting. So Doug Christie, first as Attorney General, then as governor, and later as a private lawyer, desperately trying to stay relevant, helped them fight this all the way to the Supreme Court. Finally, Murphy versus the NCAA did get to the Supreme Court, and SCOTUS cited the 10th Amendment, overturned this law. Okay.
This is a timekeeper. You're down to 3 minutes. You might want to step it up.
3 minutes.
Try to finish up.
I'm going to ask for about 5 minutes if possible. I will try and finish up real quick. Okay. So here's what it looks like nowadays. All right. Basically, this may be too small for you to read, but basically the red and the pink is where sports betting is legal, it is active, or it is about to become active. The grays and the whites are places where legislation has recently died or legislation has no chance. States like Hawaii, Georgia, Utah, we're talking specifically. But take a look at Colorado. Colorado here is in the yellow. That is the only one that is currently up for ballot initiative right now. In fact, the reason why that happens is because this just isn't the usual way. It just usually isn't done this way. Again, this is about money makers. This is about the corporations trying to skirt the law. Okay, let's go back again real quick. Proposition 26 would allow sports betting in the casinos. Proposition 27 would allow it online. Proposition 27. It's pretty fishy. The argument here, it's entitled the Legalized Sports Betting and Revenue for Homelessness Prevention Fund Initiative. They argue that they will offer protections for those 21 or older. They will impose a 10% tax on sports betting revenues that we talked about, and will allocate some tax revenue to an account for homelessness programs and an account for tribes not operating sports betting. Okay, fair enough. Here's your protection for those 18 and older. Now, I had to take this from a marijuana website. Okay, but this is basically the security that you're going to get when these guys legalize online gambling in California. You're going to have to click this button. What minds could get past that? Not only that, the reason why I had to use a marijuana site here is because I asked my teenage daughter to go online to a sports betting website, and she was able to without this warning. So I don't know how much I'm going to trust this. We're going to protect 18-year-olds. In fact, there's a case against this where in Indiana, 32 kids by mistake just happened to be able to log on to FanDuel, despite them claiming that there were these protections. So I don't know how seriously you can take that. Okay, the more important part is the taxes and allocations of revenue. Okay, we're going to impose this 10% tax, and we're going to put this into the homelessness program and to the account of the tribes. Okay, I crunched the numbers on this for the website. You can read about it there. Basically, the way that it stands is the California government currently has arrangements with 79 tribes and agreements with another 4 pending. Okay, 63 tribes run 66 casinos. Okay, so most of them are already open for business. Okay, in 2021, these 63 tribes paid $65 million, okay, to regulatory fees. That's the 10% they're talking about. And they paid tens of millions, quote unquote, in local taxations, also money to gambling addiction programs. Another $150 million, this is the real key point for the socialists here. Another $150 million is redistributed from the bigger casino money-making tribes to those tribes with 350 slot machines or fewer. Okay, this is redistribution of wealth in action. Okay, now, how would the numbers look with legalized sports betting in California? Here's the numbers I came up with. Now, I'm using New York as a comparison because the markets are about the same size. The sports market might actually be a bit bigger in New York because they do a lot more sports betting there than I think we tend to do in California. But let's just say that's more or less the same size. Okay, so the maximum of 5% will be invested in California's tribal economic development. Okay, on revenues in 2021 of $666 million from the casinos, okay, the tribes paid $90 million in taxes, like I talked about, and addiction programs. Okay, argument 4. New York's sports betting market received about $110 million a month from sports betting. Okay, already casino tribes give $150 million in tribes with, sorry, that one's out of order, sorry. Similar numbers would result in a total from the plan of about $20 million to the tribal account and about $112 million to homelessness per year. That's at the maximum if all that 10% goes here. And there's much reason to suggest that all that 10% won't go there. Okay, that's $20 million for the
You're over
tribal
20
account.
minutes. Try to sum up.
I'm going to need 5 more.
Well, you don't have 5 at the end then if you do it now.
Okay.
Okay,
He can
take it
he
now.
can take some of mine.
Okay. I need 5 more minutes. Okay. So, again, at the max, 20 million to the tribes, 112 million to homeless. Okay. Already, right now, the tribes already give 150 million a year from casino profits to tribes with 350 slots or less. That's only the smaller ones. Under the online sports betting plan, since no tribes have online sports betting, this 112 million gets distributed to all of them. Okay, already less money for the tribes there. Also, in terms of homelessness, to which we will devote about 112 million, the state of California already spends about $6 billion a year on homelessness. And this revenue fund would therefore represent about a 1.87% contribution. Not exactly a lot of money there. Okay, another quick arguments for Proposition 27, okay? Sports betting is nearly everywhere, so why can't Californians have it? Why should we allow sports books only in bricks and mortar casinos when a lot of Californians don't have access to them? Why can't Native American casinos just open their own online sports book? And what about all those advertisements saying tribes are for this proposition? Okay, sports betting is nearly everywhere, so why can't Californians have it? Okay, we certainly can have sports betting, but I believe that corporations should be held accountable to the law. In other words, if we get sports betting in the casinos, that means online sports betting is next. They just want to follow the steps to the process. You just have to wait. Why should we allow sports books only in casinos? Well, for some people, the inaccessibility to minors is a plus. Maybe you should have to go to the casino. Maybe there should be some control over who can go in there, as opposed to online. Why can't the Native American casinos just open their own online offering? Well, they can, okay? But the big companies, their websites are set. They're ready to go on day one. They can open. And since everybody knows those brand names because of national advertising, what chance does anybody else have? And finally, what about all those advertisements saying tribes are for this problem? Well, let's talk about those advertisements. There's one that's been running on national football lately, which is the libertarian stand, which is, we need freedom. We need to be able to bet online. Okay, but the one you probably have seen is the one with, a Native American fellow telling everybody how they're against it and how it'll do good for the tribes and whatnot. Okay, here's this gentleman here, Jose Moque Simon III. Now, he's a chairman of a tribe in Middletown. He represents a tribe of 71 people, okay, that owns a casino on resort land. I personally believe that he may be for this because, hey, if he gets a sports book in his casino, or if he has to put anything in his casino, he has to give that money to all these other tribes, man. With this new deal, he doesn't have to give hardly anything, to anybody else. He can keep it at his casino. All the profit is his. Now, for those who appreciate Orwellian language, you have to check out the slogan here, protect tribal sovereignty. This, in fact, does the exact opposite. This ad is paid for by Californians for Solutions to Homelessness and Mental Health Support, a coalition of housing and mental health experts, concerned taxpayers, and digital sports entertainment and gaming companies. Committee major funding from, of course. All right. This is what it's about, folks. It's about, let's change the Constitution so we can make tens of millions of dollars. Okay. The real opposition to Prop 27. I just want to get this in there real quick because a lot of people are going, wait, I saw this commercial that said that. Okay. I'd encourage you to go to noon27.com, which shows backing and endorsements for No on 27 from 51 tribes, 7 housing and homeless advocates, 3 mental health groups, 12 educational groups, including the California Teachers Association, 4 labor unions, 29 social justice and community groups, 23 political groups, including the state's Democratic and Republican parties. Okay. Yes on 26, no on 27. If the Democrats, Republicans, and Peace and Freedom can agree, there's got to be something there. Thank you. Sorry I went over time.
Okay. Last but not least, we have David Campbell. Dave is a Peace and Freedom Party activist in San Francisco City and County. And so, Dave, you're on. And he'll be speaking about Proposition 30.
Okay. So, Proposition 30 is a textbook example of just what's wrong with the way ballot initiatives are done and all the different ways to that we need to look at every ballot initiative that comes across. It starts off with a great sounding premise: tax the rich in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Had us in the first half, not going to lie. But the reason it sounds so good is because the people who write these things are professionals. In fact, I used to work for some of them. The first thing is you always skip right by that top line where it says what they want you to think about it and go to the bottom. The most important part of any piece of election literature, any ad, anything like that, is a place at the bottom where it says who paid for it. Now, that's been covered by previous speakers a little bit, so I'll just get into this one in particular. So going to the Secretary of State website, there are 3 organizations listed in favor of Prop 30. Yes on 30, Clean Air California, a coalition of state firefighters, working families, rideshare companies, and environmental groups. Nice how they hid that in there, second to last. Turns out when you look at that group and whose money is in it, it's just about all left. They started it and they've kicked in tens of millions, that total of 37 million as of the time of this writing, including 2 $10 million injections just in September. So it's left. Others include CAL FIRE, electrical workers unions and associations, and various wealthy individuals, including investors and venture capitalists, and Norman Lear, interestingly enough, but it's left. The second group is California Environmental Issues Committee, Yes on 30, which is just an anodyne group, and that was also started and left, and it's just got $200,000 from left. So I don't know what that's doing there. And then finally, the third organization, and this is clever, is called Yes on 30, Working Families and Environmental Voters to Expose Greedy Billionaires and CEOs. This includes a $90,000 contribution from the California Environmental Voters group in late June, and a $100,000 contribution from the California State Association of Electrical Workers. Now, both of those are also contributors to that first organization, which is the big one. But they decided to put relative pocket change into this last one, apparently just to have an organization with a base name. So that's who's for it. It's left and some people who are, basically got bought in on it. The opposition has a group just called No on 30, and its contributions are from basically a whole bunch of rich investors and officers of various LLCs and partnerships, not generally our friends. And that totals 11.5 million, which is about a quarter of what Lyft itself has put in on the other side. And then No on 30 Educators Opposed to Corporate Handouts, sponsored by teachers and school employees organizations, which is in fact sponsored by teachers and school employee organizations. 250,000 each from the California Federation of Teachers and the California Teachers Association. So not much money, but it's for real. And that's who's against it. So looking at this, we can see that this whole thing was put on the ballot by Lyft for Lyft. So what are they trying to sell us? What's the pitch? And this is where the second trick that always comes in with these corporate sponsored ballot initiatives is the package deal. They always want to, I mean, the bulk of the thing is for the corporation's benefit, but they always need to package it in something that, you know, they can bring people who sound like friends in on the deal. So in this case, they brought in, they say it's for reducing air pollution and preventing wildfires. So they give wildfire response and prevention activities 20% of the money raised. So they got CAL FIRE in on the deal, and they contributed some money, and they've been doing some in-kind contributions, publicizing for it and all that as well. 80% goes to zero emission vehicle programs, split between subsidies for EV purchases and installation of EV charging stations. And that sounds good too, right? I mean, EVs are good. Well, yes and no. For one thing, this isn't actually going to increase the number of EVs on the road because, as it turns out, there's already a mandate to switch from gas burning cars to EVs. Already there's a mandate for every new EV sold in California to be a zero emission, including plug-in hybrid or hydrogen fuel cell car by 2035, and it ramps up to that 100% starting like next year. And rideshare companies are already mandated to switch their fleets to electric. So as the legislative analyst says in the voter handbook, and this is before the mandate was approved, so it's if the mandate is approved, it says the additional funding from the proposition to help buy new ZEVs would not have much effect on the total number of ZEVs. Instead, the proposition's main effect would be to shift who pays for the ZEVs. So that's what Lyft is trying to do. They already have to switch to EVs, but they're trying to make the taxpayer pay the bill. And so that's what it is. They invest tens of millions of dollars to get a ballot proposition onto the ballot in order to hopefully make that money back on the other end, getting us to pay for their vehicles. So this is another issue that we get in legislation is we've been told for decades due to the neoliberal consensus of both Democrats and Republicans that the best way to get corporations to do the things we want is incentives to pay them to do the right thing. But as the last 4 decades of this kind of thinking ought to have demonstrated to anybody watching, the corporations are perfectly happy to take the money and do what they were going to do anyway, unless they are mandated legally to do the thing and punished for not doing it. Once we have a mandate, we don't need to pay them for it. We're already paying them. That's what profit is. And so if they need to readjust their corporate model in order to make a profit, you know, due to the shift in the corporate, you know, in the mandates, that's what they need to do. That's the cost of doing business. That's capitalism. Now, working people may need help in, for instance, switching from a dirty old gas burning car to an electric, and the mandate law already provides for that. It's got a, you know, rebate for people turning in old gas burning cars to trade in for an EV. It's got other subsidies for poor and working class people. And that's all you need. You don't need corporation subsidies. Now, the other thing coming in with dealing with Lyft and their sponsorship of legislation in particular, people who've been paying attention may remember that Lyft, along with their fellow quote unquote ride sharing company, Uber, sponsored another piece of legislation recently to exempt themselves from the laws requiring them to treat the people that make their money for them, the people who do the work that makes their money, as employees with the rights of employees. And they managed to get that passed because they had the money to pay for the advertising to fool people. Excuse me. So that's, you know, another piece of corporate sponsored legislation and how that works. The gig taxi was promoted as a way to give drivers more freedom and flexibility in their work schedules, and you can just be your own boss, as they say. But all it's delivered to the vast majority of the people who drive for them is increased exploitation and misery and precarity and uncertainty and vulnerability. So that's how they managed to preserve that. It was also promoted at the beginning as a way to reduce the number of cars going around because you no longer have to drive your own, you can just hail a ride. So supposedly that was meant to reduce the number of cars on the streets. But again, as everybody who's been paying attention has noticed, it's resulted in increased traffic congestion because an unregulated number of taxi drivers are driving around the most densely populated areas looking for fares all day. So the old medallion-based system of taxi cab service was obviously messed up. Otherwise, the gig taxi never would have taken off in the first place. But the gig taxi only makes the problems worse and adds new ones. The whole thing needs a complete rethink, and the for-profit corporations are never going to provide the answers. We need something entirely different on that. The main problem isn't how cars are powered, and it's not how cars are piloted. The main problem is cars. The automobile is simply the worst tool for the job of moving large numbers of people from their various points of A to B in a densely populated area. That's not a question of politics or aesthetics or even economics. It's a simple matter of geometry, arithmetic, and physics. Everybody comes individually wrapped in their own separate big metal box. They take up way too much space, and there just isn't that much. So city streets are going to be clogged. Highways are going to be clogged. There's no way around it. And one more lane ain't going to fix it. The only way to get around, to fix the problem of traffic and to fix the problem of cars spewing pollution and so forth, isn't to change all the cars to electric, and it isn't to make all the cars autonomously driven or driven by robot workers. The solution is to re-engineer the transportation infrastructure that's been engineered around the automobile as default to make it back to where it kind of was before, where you had walkable neighborhoods with mixed use, so you could walk to the store instead of having to drive. And you had streets that were safe to ride a bicycle in because you weren't going to get run over by a car. And you had mass transit. we need to bring those back and bring them up to modern standards and power the buses and the trams and all of that by electricity with wires. So the other part of this thing was the tax the rich part. That had me in the first half. Sounds great, right? Yeah, we should definitely tax the rich, but not to subsidize corporations to buy electric cars with. Once the tax money is collected, it belongs to us, and we should figure out what to do with it rather than letting a company sponsored piece of legislation decide that for us. So this is the whole thing about ballot box budgeting. And all the political experts always say whenever you have a ballot measure that proposes to raise any kind of tax, you need to have an earmark to say where it's going to go to, because otherwise people won't like it because they don't trust the legislature to do the right thing with the money that's in the general fund. And that is a problem because, well, everybody knows the legislature is heavily influenced by the rich, their lobbyists, campaign contributions, and so forth and so on. And that's why the initiative process was put in the first place, in order to try to get around all of that and let the people, supersede the legislature, go over their heads and do legislation directly. The problem is it also lets the rich do their legislation directly, as we've seen. And since they have all the money for the advertising and the all the experts to tell them how to write it, they get their way most of the time. And so what we really need is democracy, not for the rich, but for the working class, both in the legislature and in the initiative process. And that means getting money out of politics, basically. And that's another subject, and one that's far beyond the scope of this presentation. And so I'm going to leave it there. Over.
Stan, you're muted.
Yes, I'm sorry, there's some trouble on my icon. Now we're going to get to the public comment session. I say public comment as opposed to Q&A because unlike all too many virtual events, we're not having a webinar. We're not having the thing where only the experts can lecture and people have to passively listen and maybe make a comment on chat as long as it's very scrupulously polite and respectful and everything. You can make comment. You'll have 3 minutes to make comments or ask questions, or a combination of both. We do ask you not make any personal attacks. Keep it political. It can be, you can heatedly disagree, but don't make it personal or you'll be cut off. And so you can raise your hand by going to the reaction section icon and raise your hand. So I'll wait to, I'll call, say, 3 people at a time, and then we'll move forward after that. We have one up now. Do we have other speakers? Okay, and let's try to get one more. Do I hear a third? All right, well, this is, yes, we do. Okay, Michael Karsh, followed by James Vann, followed by Dave Kavlicek. Michael, you're on.
Okay, one question I have regarding propositions 26 and 27. One thing I hated when I went to the Nevada casino is that there was smoking allowed in the casino, because in most buildings smoking is banned. So would propositions 26 and 27 do anything about the smoking in the casinos?
David, can you very briefly answer that?
That's a great question. I doubt it. But as I understand it, most of the Native American casinos do not have alcohol. So I would be surprised if they had smoking. I don't know for sure. I haven't been years and years to one out here, but so yeah, but nothing in the bills as far as I know.
Well, if anybody does a quick research and wants to put it in chat, feel free. James Van. James, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know why my hand raised is not down. I certainly support the party. I do think, though, in its endorsements of the propositions, and I agree with all but Proposition 26. I think that it's a mistake to endorse that. I think it's a result. I think to endorse it simply based on the proposition of native sovereignty. When you look more closely at what the proposition does, it is not supported by a majority of Indian tribes. It was written by only 3 of the largest tribes, and the motivation is simply greed. There is nothing in 26 that would call for sharing of the proceeds from changing the Constitution, and that's what this would do. It would change the California Constitution, which now defines and limits certain kinds of gaming to the casinos, which I'm in favor of. However, this would change the Constitution and remove all limitations. And the 3 largest tribes stand to profit enormously from this. There's nothing in the legislation that would say they would share with non-gaming tribes or with less rich tribes. And there's nothing in it that says that they would contribute to any other problems of the state, to homelessness or to affordable housing or anything else. The increased revenues, and right now they are actually into the billions now, and the quality of life on Indian reservations is improving. Sure has a lot more to go, but it's certainly improving by the vast amount of money they're getting. And I think that it was a mistake not to have read this a little more closely before having endorsed 26. I certainly agree to a no on 27, but it should have been a no on both 26 and 27. Thank you.
Okay, Dave Kadlacek, and followed by Norma Harrison and Dave Landry. You can address this at the end of the event at your wrap up, if you choose to. Dave?
Yeah, I have a comment about 26 and 27, both in sports family generally, and some specific questions about 26 and 1. The specific question about 26 is whether it would allow betting on quote unquote March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament. That's one of the most popular things to bet on legally or otherwise, because it says it bans betting on anything involving California college teams, except that it would allow for betting on the results of other games in a tournament in which one California college teams take place. So I think that would mean that it would ban, doing a bracket unless there were no California teams that made it into that. But that's the question. My question on Prop 1 is what it would actually change, given that the California courts have already recognized a right to abortion, choice in abortion as part of an explicit right to privacy in the California Constitution, that it doesn't seem like this actually adds any protections. I agree we need to vote for it because of the political consequences were it to be defeated, but I don't really see that it changes anything of any significance legally. My general comments on 26 and 27 is I'm kind of leery of sports betting generally because unless it's restricted so much so as that no one has any significant amounts of money at stake, because it's betting on something that can be influenced by spending money. Bribing players or refs or coaches or whatever, so that but when you bet on in a lottery or play cards or roulette or dice or whatever, it's random events. They operate as they were. There's no sort of incentives to corruption of outside events that are happening anyway. But when you're betting on sports and actually comparable things of betting on things like election results, when a hurricane will make landfall, all sorts of things that people bet on, which I presume are not allowed as sports betting.
3 minutes is up, please wrap up.
Okay. Well, just finishing, betting on those kinds of things. If someone can bet a lot of money, they have an incentive to try and impact the results of what they're betting on, and have black socks.
All right. Since we have a couple of direct questions regarding 26 and 27, before I call on Norma, don't worry, Norma, you will be called on. I'd like to give David Landry, try to keep it no more than 3 minutes, David, to respond to David Kavalichek's questions, and I believe a question from James Van. Thank you.
Okay. Some confusion about what 26 and 27 are going to do to the Constitution. 27 is the one that changes the Constitution. If we vote yes on Prop 27, that will make a passage in the Constitution that says online sports betting is legal. By federal law, we know that if the state of California says that native-run casinos can have sports books, then they can. Yes, there is nothing in Prop 26 to the first question. There is nothing about Prop 26 that says that the Native Americans have to redistribute the money to other tribes. But guess what? There wasn't in the original legislation that allowed casinos either. That's their law. That's tribal redistribution of money. And Prop 26 would allow the sports bettings in the casinos to be regulated and run by the Native Americans. Odds say they will do the same thing. They have provided for their people in the past. Odds are they'll do the same thing in the future. There's nothing to suggest that offshore companies won't take the money and run. Nothing, on the other hand. As to Dave's question about the college teams, yes, I didn't want to get too deep in the weeds about that because of sports. But Massachusetts and New York also ran up against this problem. What do we do when our home college teams are playing in a game and somebody might buy them? They just don't allow betting on that. As far as March Madness goes, Dave, we don't know because we haven't seen it yet with states like Massachusetts, New York, California, who have agreed not to allow betting on the college teams to take place. We don't know what's going to happen. This March will tell us.
Okay, I'm going to call on Norma. Then after Norma, I believe Marsha probably wants to respond to the direct question concerning Proposition 1. All right, Norma, you're on.
The presentations have been excellent. Excellent. Stop coughing.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, was that you? And James Van's comment is also excellent and much appreciated. Marsha has added another comment that is important into the chat. You might want to look at that if you use the chat. My comments out of the chat are, it is self-explanatory, the response that was made to my comments, that capitalism creates the desperation to bet one's resources in order to try yet another method to survive, to get along. Capitalism, we all know, is not a victimless crime. It is a brutal effort that has amassed forces that proceed around the world, including against Russia for the past 110 years, to assault and attack any kind of attempt at principled national behaviors. You all know that. So the necessity for us is to redesign society. I think Dave Campbell led me into thinking about this, because we don't want to control the corporations. We want to supplant them with the other status of work and production. And I'm hoping that maybe we can get a group of people together to devise an examination of what those structures might be, because we've got to stop telling people that they are workers instead of telling them they're human beings deserving the best of worlds. People don't like to be told they're in the working class. You know that people have eschewed it for quite a long time. They like to be told that they're human and deserve the very best of living and need to control Earth and the society so that it is for the benefit of all of us. The other thing that people have to understand is there is a peace movement being called for. The peace movement, when it was going on, and I remember Vietnam in particular, but any of them, happened alongside of slaughter, of years of slaughter, of horrification of the land. And we stood around and said, give us peace, give us peace. And people did various things like resistance against the draft, for example, which caused integration of the
3
draft
minutes, time is up.
to,
Please
in-
wrap up.
to include women.
Okay, and Marsha Feinland will be responding not to the question on 1, but the question on 26. Marsha?
Yeah, I didn't see a question on Prop 1. If there is, someone should ask it again. I just wanted to respond to James, because I think, James, you have 26 and 27 mixed up. There are on Ballotpedia, there are listed 26 tribes that are supporting Proposition 26. I could read all the names off, but that would take up a lot of time. You can find it on Ballotpedia. But that's not all, because I used to live on the Hooper Reservation and on the North Coast. So I looked to see what some of the North Coast tribes, and they were all for Proposition 26 and against Proposition 21. And those are some of the smaller tribes that do have casinos, but they're out of the way, so they don't get the big money. So the money gets shared. The other thing that you have to understand is that when the tribal, the reason the tribes needed or wanted to have gambling is to provide for the tribal members who need the housing and the healthcare and everything else. And so the profits don't go into someone's pockets. The profits go into supporting the tribal members. On the other hand, the money, David talked a little bit about how little of the money goes towards housing and towards homelessness and mental health programs in California from the possibility of Prop 27. We have to understand that 10% has to stay in California. The other 90% goes to those companies that are not in California and that are not doing anything for any people except the owners of those corporations. So there's a big difference between Proposition 26 and Proposition 27. And I think we need to be for Proposition 26 and against Proposition 27. Other organizations that support 26, by the way, are some Baptist Ministers Conference of Los Angeles and Southern California, the La Raza Roundtable of California, the Los Angeles Urban League, Rural Surge of Northern California, San Diego and Sacramento and Santa Barbara, the Santa Clarita branch of the NAACP, Showing Up for Racial Justice in San Francisco, the Urban League of San Diego, etc. Because even though, I mean, it's too bad that the tribes need to get the money from the casinos. It's too bad we don't have a system that provides for everybody's needs, but at least the money will go towards real human needs and not for profits for rich corporations. I'm also trying to look up the issue of smoking. Is smoking allowed in tribal casinos? I'll come up with that answer later. Thanks.
Okay, we have a few minutes before we get to the wrap up of the three speakers. Would anyone else like to speak? Any questions or comments from anyone else? Okay,
I can repeat the question about Prop 1 I asked that Marsha said she didn't hear.
yeah, just repeat it. And then we have two more questions after that. We have CT Weber, and I thought somebody else popped up for a second. They seemed to disappear. But go ahead, Dave.
We have 30 minutes.
Thank you for the timekeeping, Norma.
Well, you were timekeeping and you're wrong.
Thanks. Where would I be without you?
You
Dave,
don't
go ahead.
know.
The question about Prop 1 is what it would change legally as opposed to, I mean, there's a political reason for voting for it, but that there's already a right to choice on abortion in the California Constitution from the explicit right to privacy and court ruling and state court rulings.
Marsha, do you have a quick comment about that?
Sure. We've seen what happened with Supreme Court rulings, haven't we? The explicit right in the California Constitution is only to the right to privacy, which could also change. But there's no explicit, I mean, you said it's an explicit right to abortion and contraception because of the right to privacy. It's not explicit. It's only explicit if you make it explicit. That's the difference.
Okay, now we have CT Weber from Sacramento. CT, take it away.
Yeah, I was just thinking a few years back, I did go to a Indian casino to do a little blackjack, and there were smoking sections. Now, I don't know if it was just that one or all of them, but this one did have smoking. I have to say I was one of the ones that when this debate went on, I thought we should have taken no position on 26. And for the very reason of the massive amount of money, and yet I get appeals every day from native nations all around the country begging for money because they're so poor, and so it doesn't get shared to everybody. And I know it's just a California thing, but there's a lot of poor still suffering. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, before I see Norma would like to speak again, but before I call on Norma, is any other one else like to speak? Anyone else have their hands up? I don't see anything. I'm going to call myself briefly just for a second, and then I'll turn it over to Norma. Excuse me. Just a couple of, this is on the category FYI. Every union federation I've seen so far, and trade union in California has abstained on the issue of 26. None have called for a yes or a no vote. For example, last night I happened to be at a candidates event for the Oakland School Board, which representatives from different unions were there. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union, which I used to be a member, I'm a retired member now, took a position of no recommendations on 26 and 27. So did the Alameda Labor Council, and so did the Los Angeles Federation of Labor, which is by far, for obvious reasons, the largest federation in the state. And speaking to a representative from AFSCME, who was there last night, and she was there representing her local, she's the vice president of the local, she stated that despite what some may feel, that many of the tribes still fight unionization. They say they're exempt from unionization. The leaders say they're exempt from unionization, even though many of the workers there are Native American too, due to the fact of on the basis of tribal sovereignty. And also some have resisted even minimum wage laws. Now, I don't know what's the exact facts and figures on that, but I do know that no unions I know of are voting or supporting 26 or 27. With exception, no on 27 in the case of the California Federation of Teachers, Teacher Association that Marsha mentioned earlier. So I just wanted to throw that out there for people's considerations. And so Norma, if you'd like to speak again, and then, well, first off, one last call. Is there any last speakers, anyone else who'd like to speak who hasn't had a chance to speak already? All right, Norma.
Yeah, let's not discourage people by telling them that hurry up, we're at the end. We're not. I posted another comment. I actually copied it from the beginning because people joined after they would have gotten this message. It's an article in Harper's Magazine, why liberals should give up on the judiciary, which might come as a surprise to many people. This is a tremendously substantial presentation about how regressive the law is. The law relies on past decisions. It says precedent rules decisions, depending on who is officiating on these things. There has been a period of time where that kind of has been gone past in order to create legislation that has been serviceable to us, among which, of course, was Roe. The article, as I said, if you look it up and can't get through it, write me a note and I'll send you the whole article.
Okay, now I
And
see
oh,
we-
and by the way, school is a terrible thing to do to children and people. It's a device to marshal our children away from the family, away from friends and community, into obedience to our owners, the profiteers, the profit-making social structure. And that's an exclusive behavior by schools. And you can tell by the pain that you went through to get through school. And if you've forgotten that pain, that is the amnesia, the selective amnesia that we have to apply to ourselves to make our lives able to be handled.
Okay, I see Bill Balderson, who among other things is a retired open school teacher, would like to speak. Hey, Bill, you're on.
Thank you, Stan. I'll not respond to Norma, but well, talking about students, I think that it's an opportunity to the Proposition 1 is an opportunity to point out that on one hand, we need to utilize the legislative, not legislative, but I mean the apparatus that will protect us. And at the same time, note that we have to go beyond it and have to defend these things, that they're not mutually exclusive, but certainly not sufficient. And I think the other thing relating to Proposition 1 is the idea that even while we talk about defense in California, we have to be talking about this as something that goes beyond California. So it's an opportunity to use it, I think, as a even though we're assuming it will pass handily, nonetheless, it's a chance to educate people, and especially young people, I think, around how we can utilize initiatives and at the same time go beyond them. Thanks.
Okay, now we're gonna get to our final wrap up. We're gonna go in reverse order in the interest of fairness. So Dave Campbell will speak first, followed by David Landry, and followed by Marsha Feinland. Dave, you're on.
Well, this will be quick because I haven't really prepared a wrap up. Everything that I said, there was a lot of it, and goes through a number of different topics. But basically, the solution to climate change, electric cars are better than gas burning cars because electric anything is better than gas burning anything. The problem is they're still cars, and that's what's clogging up the cities. That's what's making, you know, highways have to get wider and wider because somehow they think that one more lane will fix it. And it's just not good. So and certainly paying Lyft to switch to electric cars, which they're already mandated to do anyway, is not in our interest. So it's corporate packaging around a corporate subsidy, and we need to vote no. And that's all I got.
David Landry.
Yeah, I don't have much of a closer either. It kind of hit me when I was doing this, how insane the prevalence of sports in our lives is. We're at a very unique point in human culture that sports plays such a large role in our society worldwide. There have been cultures in the past that were pretty sports obsessed, but I think only now is it such an obsession worldwide. This sports betting thing is a big deal. It's a lot of money. And I know how I stand. I know how the party stands. I know why some people are shaky on 26. I know even why I guess maybe some people are hesitant about 27, voting no on 27. But however you vote, just like think about it a lot. Because again, this is a lot of money. This is a lot of money. Somebody stated before about how, it's too bad that the tribes have to make money this way. And in some states, they don't even have this option, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the thing is, like in 1982, one of the first things Ronnie Reagan did to the federal budget was cut almost 80% of the funding that was going to Native American tribes from the federal government. Okay, this is it, right? This is, a lot of people think that IGRA, the Indian Gambling Regulatory Act, was signed as a SOP, as an apology for screwing them so badly in 1982, the Native American folks. So again, no matter how you think, just like really think long and hard about this. I know the moral implications are tricky for some people. I know the union issue is tricky for some people, but really, it deserves a lot of thought. This is a lot of money, a lot of money.
Okay, Marsha Feinland.
Oh, hi. I thought I'm not muted, so I don't have to unmute. Thanks. So I guess to end up, I would just go through a summary again of our position, but also I wanted to answer a couple of things. One was about smoking. I did a little research on smoking at tribal casinos. Tribal casinos are not subject to California's anti-smoking law because they're sovereign. However, many casinos they'll have like a smoking section. I mean, they'll do something voluntarily. There are casinos that have more smoking than others, and only 3 casinos at this point are entirely smoke-free. So that is an issue. The other thing was about the unions and the tribal casinos. That's another place where the tribes do have proclaimed sovereignty, although some are unionized. And now there's it looks like there's a lawsuit that's being settled, which is making the tribes, they're going to have to go union as long as the unions are formed. They're not going to be able to say we're sovereign and the law about allowing unionization doesn't apply to us. So that's going to be something that is resolved, even though it has been an issue in the past. So I just want to urge everybody to just run through these propositions. Yes on 1, guarantee reproductive freedom. Yes on 26, to uphold tribal sovereignty, to allow the tribes to control any new forms of gambling in the tribal casinos and other places where sports betting is allowed. No on 27, because it's a scam by the betting companies to get all that betting money out of California and into their own pockets, away from solving the problems of human needs. Yes, fund on 28, fund art and music in the schools. For one thing, it would make school a much more fun place, but also we have different opinions about how much people like or have benefits from leaving their family and getting to go to school. Some people think that's a good thing. Yes, on 29, make healthcare safer by having more regulation of dialysis clinics. No on 30, because it's a corporate subsidy for ride sharing. They call it ride sharing. I call it driver exploitation. Nobody's sharing anything. It's funded by Lyft because they want someone else to pay for the electric cars that they have to have, which incidentally, their mandate is sooner than the mandate for the rest of us, but we're not sure about what year that is. And I really like the way Dave explained that once you have tax money, it belongs to all of us.
Well, you explained it at the meeting, so.
Oh, okay. All right. Also, it's real. I mean, I for a long time felt like cars are not the solution. Cars are the problem, because it's more than just fuel. It has to do with highway construction and what that does to the environment. There's a whole host of issues around the fact that the car industry basically got rid of public transportation, destroyed it in California in order to promote private cars. And that's not, it's the opposite of socialism. It's not the way to go. We need real planning in order to have a decent transportation system. And yes, on 31, to uphold the Senate bill that ends the tobacco companies being allowed to addict our children with flavored tobacco products. So I hope you all vote. I hope you go on the Peace and Freedom Party website. It's interesting to me that Ballotpedia actually includes Peace and Freedom Party in political parties that take positions on propositions. I know the Green Party has propositions too, and I'm kind of sorry that no one from the Green Party spoke up today, but I think our positions are similar. So thanks for coming.
Okay, before we close it completely, does anybody have any announcements of upcoming progressive events, forums, rallies, etc.? If so, now's the time to make.
Our next
Barry, go ahead.
forum. Our next forum is on China.
Oh, I was going
Please
to
come.
do
Go, you
the,
mentioned that.
Oh no, but before we get into that, any other, Marsha's going to summarize with that.
Oh, okay.
Do we have any other progressive events or forums or demonstrations planned in the near future? Okay, nobody has their hand up. I do want to mention also there are numerous city and town resolutions and propositions throughout the Bay Area, including in San Francisco, Berkeley, Livermore, Vallejo, and a few other places. And people should go to the Peace and Freedom Party Alameda County website, for example, and you could look that up, and also other progressive organizations. While we may disagree with some of the trade union leaders from some, I think most of us agree with most of the recommendations in city and town propositions are up, and county propositions. People should go to the respective California Federation of Labor or their county labor federations, see what they have to say. And we have two hands up right now, probably in this issue, 3 hands now. C.T. Weber and Tom Lacey.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's probably out of the area for you guys, but there are a couple of events next Saturday going on in Sacramento. One at 11 a.m. There's a park called Crocker Park in Sacramento on the west side, where the Poor People's Campaign is going to be marching to the Capitol and have a rally there. Also at 5 o'clock, Take Back the Night. It's a women's movement. So we hope to participate in those as well. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, I assume people can get more information by going to respective websites, the Poor People's Campaign and Take Back the Night, Sacramento. Okay, Tom Lacey.
I'm not muted. Good. I just wanted to announce that there is a large anti-war mobilization next Saturday, October 15th, 12 noon, at the Federal Building in Oakland. And it's sponsored by the United National Anti-War Coalition that Peace and Freedom Party is part of. And the blurb that I got says, today working people face escalating costs of land, energy, recession, growing insecurity, and attacks on efforts to unionize. The following wars, the continuing wars and military provocations have brought us to the brink of nuclear war. Yet during this election period, imperialist foreign policy has been getting little attention. It is time for us to be back in the streets to demand for an end to U.S. wars and provocations.
Okay, before I call on Norma and then turn it over to Marsha for closing remarks, Greg Jan of the local Alameda County Green Party has just posted the state Green Party is voting on our propositions on the state propositions right now. We'll finish by Monday. Various county Green parties taking their own positions on them, including here in Alameda County. See acgreens.org. All right, Norma, and then afterwards, Marsha will wrap things up. Norma, please go ahead.
Greg posted his comment on the chat that Stan read. Pretty, look at it because it's got the Greens address. I've posted a comment that I will read to you. What makes you think, I addressed this to the candidates for the school board here in Berkeley that we're running for, 5 candidates. What makes you think you can repair a compulsorily age-segregated social structure designed to marshal people through the daily indoctrination into fitting into the for-profit brutality that is the U.S. American social system? Of course, the U.S. is not alone in doing this. That has made the system pretty much appear God-given. Everybody thinks of capitalism, oh, well, that's the way it is. Natural to human beings, to which racism is required, which is a babysitting service. So parents, friends, family can go to their effective cubicle to make profit for our owners. Yes, 180 years have been spent on school reform because when it started out, parents and communities didn't like the handling of this group of people, this segregated group of people from birth to age 18 and in between.
Okay, Marsha, would you like to take
Sure,
it away and wrap things up?
I'll refrain from responding.
I'm not asking for a response.
All right, I'm sorry, Norma. I'm going to close up now. Thank you. So I want to thank everyone for participating in this Suds, Snacks, and Socialism Forum. The forums take place on the first or second, sometimes Saturday of most months. Join us again on November 5th. That will be the first Saturday in November for our forum called The U.S. versus China, the New Cold War. You can sign up to get your forum announcements by requesting to do so in the chat or by emailing us at info@sudssnackssocialism.org. And I think the address will be posted in the chat by some wizard or other. I just want to announce that we're thinking about returning to in-person forums, but we would do it as a hybrid forum so that you would be able to either come to the Starry Plow and participate or participate online. And we're working on that, but I thought I'd take a little poll. If you go to your reactions, if you would come, if you're interested in coming to in-person forums again, could you please raise your hand in the chat or do a thumbs up or something? I think a thumbs up would be good. If you are interested in coming to—
Or vote yes.
Well, let's just do one thing. I see a check mark. In other words, just respond if you're positive. We don't need to hear about the negative because we do plan to make it hybrid so that people could participate from far away. So,
Problem with thumbs is they go away.
oh, so it's better to use hands.
It's
and
better to
clap.
use the vote.
Okay, so I see Norma voted with a green check. I see a hand up from, I see the clapping goes away. So use either the hand or the green check mark if you think you would come to an online forum. Probably wouldn't start till December because I think we're running a little late for November already.
People are not having good success with hybrid presentations.
So anyway, we see a few people that would come, and we can do more surveys later. Thank you very much for your input, and thanks for coming to the forum, and we'll see you on November 5th for US versus China, the new Cold War. Thank you.